What's good, YouTube? It's James Jones, the owner of Elevate Law, a Boston-based law firm that focuses on the unique needs of early-stage startups. And I'm coming back to you with a new video. And today I'm going to be talking to you about a question that I get asked fairly often, and that is, what type of entity should I form my startup as? And there are several different answers to this question, although there's one very common answer that I'm going to get to in a moment. But first, let me explain to you what some of the different options are for incorporating or type of entity for a startup before I finally tell you which one is the one that almost every single startup uses, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why. First off, if anyone starts doing any type of business at all, meaning you just start selling something or whatever the case is, under the laws of most states, you have formed what is called a sole proprietorship. And that is basically someone doing business, offering some service or selling some type of good. Now, a sole proprietorship pretty much gives you no shield of protection against direct liability for any problems that may arise. So if someone wants to sue you for some harm that has come to them because of a service you performed or a good that you sold them, they're coming after you. They're coming after whatever property you own. Next in line is a partnership. Now, if one other person joins you, and now you have at least two people and maybe more who are performing services or selling goods together, you have formed what is called a general partnership. A general partnership is pretty much like a sole proprietorship, except that there's more than one person involved now, meaning that you still do not get this shielding of liability that you might get with another type of entity. So if that person decides to sue you, what ends up happening with a general partnership under the laws of many states is that they can get a judgment against the partnership, and they will take whatever they can from whichever partners they're able to get it from in order to satisfy the judgment. Again, not a situation most people want to be in. So now let's talk about the actual entities that you create on purpose. So the first one that we'll talk about, in keeping in line with the partnership, is a limited partnership or a limited liability partnership. Now, with a limited partnership or a limited liability partnership, you are creating this by filing forms with usually the Secretary of State for the state that you live in. And limited partnerships are typically reserved for investment funds, and sometimes law practices, sometimes dental or doctor's offices. They have a very special set of circumstances that really warrants using that type of entity that I'm not really going to get into now, because almost none of those circumstances involve startups. The limited liability partnership is one that is usually used by law firms, doctors, dentists, and a few other types of businesses. If one person does something wrong and gets in trouble, the partnership as a whole may not be affected, whereas that one element of the partnership could be held liable separately. So now we get into the two most popular entities that businesses form, and that is the LLC and the corporation. Now, for most businesses, an LLC is like the ideal type of setup. It's pretty easy to create, although it usually costs more to create than a corporation. And you can start it up as a single member, as a multi-member. You put your operating agreement together, and then you have a lot of freedom in how you choose to operate that business, in terms of handling meetings. The fact that you don't have shareholders to answer to, only your other members within the LLC. And so you guys just can make decisions together on how to do things without thinking too much about how this might affect people who aren't involved in the running of the business. You have a lot of other freedom in terms of when you have meetings or not, how you make decisions, who's running the company. Do you have officers or do you simply have a manager? So you get to decide all of these little things. However, This is normally not the type of entity that most startups either use or should use. That entity is the corporation. And I'll explain to you the reasons why, a few of the reasons why. So, with the corporation, the basic idea is you have a board of directors that is in charge of deciding and making decisions regarding the direction the company is going to take. You have the officers who are in charge of running the day-to-day affairs of the company, the CEO or president, vice president, CFO, chief operating officer, those different types of titles. Then you have the shareholders, the people who put money into the company with the hope that when the company does well, they'll be able to get a return on their money, either through dividends or through selling the stock that they purchased, those shares. Now, the way this works and why it's a benefit to startups and why so many startups form as corporations is it makes getting into and out of the company very easy. Because if you have an investor who wants to invest, there are a couple of different investment instruments that they use, maybe a safe note or a convertible note, or if it's a priced round, you're doing a Series A where they're getting preferred shares. And so what they do is they determine, and in conjunction with the owners, determine the value of the company. Say we'll give you X thousands or millions of dollars in cash in exchange for a certain percentage of ownership in the form of a certain number of shares. The paperwork to do this, while it can be fairly extensive, is also pretty standardized and pretty set in stone with how it's done because it's done so much. Same thing in terms of establishing an option pool for employees that you want to give them stock options. It's much more difficult to do in an LLC than it is in a corporation, partially because of the way that it's so much easier to sell and bring back in stock of the company, in addition to the fact that so much of the paperwork is, like I said before, standardized for putting together an option plan. So what it really comes down to is that even though there's less of an ease of operation with a corporation as compared to an LLC, what you have is this robust ecosystem where much of the paperwork and documentation and processes that you need to do in order to give out stock, divvy up stock to contractors or employees, take on investor money, and all these other things that startups typically do within their lifespan are so much simpler to do based upon the fact that a lot of these practices have become standardized in the industry. A lot of the paperwork has become standardized in the industry, and everyone knows the process. There's no guesswork. There's no figuring out what the operating agreement says about this situation or that situation, because you can put pretty much anything you want in an operating agreement, and no two LLCs have to be the same. Whereas with corporations, it's pretty set in stone how it's going to operate, how everything's going to be done, and what process you're going to use to take an investment, to give out stock, to merge with another company, to go public, and all of these other things. The simple answer to which entity should my startup be created as is usually corporation. You want to check with an attorney first for your specific situation, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to be going with the corporate model as opposed to an LLC or some other type of entity. I hope you found this video informative and helpful. If you did, please go ahead and smack the subscribe button, smack the like button, share it out to everyone you know on social media so that they can get this information as well. And if you want to learn some more about me and about Elevate Law, please click the link in the description and you can go straight to the website and get all the information you need. Thanks again.